Well, hey there everyone, welcome back. It's new and I have it done for you. 1,000 maps in 3.25. This is the fourth time that I've done this, and I'm going to share with you the results. It's all nice and concise in a spreadsheet like I usually do. And there's some interesting findings here. We got some very difficult to answer questions about how loot was working this league. It appeared to be nerfed, at least the raw loot in general, and then we also had or at least a shadow of its former self, the Affliction League mechanic, brought back in two separate forms, one with a Wisp Scarab and an occasionally spawning Wildwood. Just a whole bunch of variables about the loot, way different than it used to be. And I want to talk to you about that, and hopefully this will shed some light on what is going on with loot, at least as we move forward. This league still has a lot of time left, as you all know. And some of you are looking forward to the subsequent PoE 1 leagues. I think the findings here are going to be extra important because the Affliction League was removed and then brought back a league after the fact, and the developers don't usually do that sort of thing unless they plan to keep it in for a while. Well, don't hold me to it. I'm hoping that the Affliction League's here to stay, at least to some extent, and that's what we're going to talk about. That's what got me motivated to do an incessant amount of grinding in 3.25, the longest I've ever played a single league. I had a great deal of fun, and I chose to do magic packs as my focus here. It turns out that native monsters on the map are dropping the most amount of loot. I don't think that's because the loot was really increased by them. I think it was just decreased from other sources like Beyond and especially just Legion, Abyss. Those that used to drop huge amounts of loot, raw loot, don't seem to that much anymore these days, and it seems to be about slamming as many monsters as you can into the map initially, as they seem to have the best drop rates for raw, naturally dropped loot. I do want to specify that, not to confuse you. I'm not talking about tile set rewards, things with a loot icon above their head, things like tainted currencies from Beyond mobs or splinters from Breach mob. Those are a separate category of loot. I'm talking about raw drops, which is what it was all about back in Affliction League, as we saw an unprecedented number of locks and mirrors dropping, and almost got to a point where it seemed like target farming these things was not actually a pie in the sky strat. So I wanted to see if we could get back to that sort of thing, or some semblance of that. And yeah, the data, well, it's going to speak for itself, but I want to go over it and share with you some of my findings. And to do that, I need to remind you a bit about Affliction League and how it worked. There are three separate types of wisps. There was purple, yellow, blue. Purple was associated with rarity, yellow was associated with quantity, blue is associated with currency, and to combine multiples of those types gave even another multiplier in loot, evidently. In other words, it was good to have all three types, even if you were just focusing on currency. Definitely seemed to be the case, especially for like lower tier monsters, not necessarily rogue exiles, but definitely most other types of monsters. And it would seem that purple wisps did actually affect the rarity tiers of blue wisp currency drops, whether it was converted or in addition to the loot that was normally dropped from monsters. Nobody really got to the bottom of that. The code was definitely not cracked, even by the end of Affliction League, even with how many people were playing. But we do have a little bit better understanding about how that works. I think with having so many people played in both 3.23 and now 3.25, it does seem that the combination of purple and blue is of course the core component, the purple definitely playing a role there, and yellow still having some value, especially as a quant multiplier for loot. Not necessarily for rogue exiles, but for basically everything else. Now, I keep bringing up rogue exiles because they are a terrific way to farm Affliction juice mechanics. Was not the case back in 3.23. We did not have the Titanic Scarab, for example, back then, and that is just dramatically increasing the amount of Wisp loot that we're getting now, and that's quite exciting. And there's some other strats, especially on tier 16 with one Wisp Scarab or none, and just using Wildwoods to get a lot of high tier currencies drop. I did tinker around with that a bit, but that is not part of this 1,000 map strat. Incidentally, also with rare monsters, almost nobody's farming Legion, Abyss, or boxes for rare Wisp juiced monsters anymore. However, the Pantheon touched mirrored strat on tier 17 did prove to be pretty decent for this, and it was definitely a legitimate way, a nice lower investment, good for headhunter buffs strategy to do. The third and final one, which I was focused on, was magic packs. This is a quantity over quality approach, the combination of the bloodline Scarab with monstrous lineage, potentially influencing Scarab of Hordes, or in my case, I used glittering Scarab because I just wanted to have a little more fun with that. And then double Wisp Scarab, and then percent increased pack size rolls on the map. Tier 17 maps, which we also did not have in Affliction League, produces an absolute metric ton of native monsters that spawn into the map, as well as influence monsters that spawn later thereafter, which are still pretty good. And those of you who are watching the highlights definitely noticed a metric ton of loot dropping from those. So those are kind of 3 different core types of strategies for focusing on Affliction, the return of the Affliction mechanic, and mine was on magic pack size. Now, what was I going for here? I was, of course, hoping to, and even advertise it as a lock mirror target farm strat. To get a better understanding of that, you have to have some sense of understanding of what the ratios of these currency drops are. That's, of course, in and of itself kind of difficult to answer because it does, again, seem like the ratios are adjusted favorably for the player the more wisps they have on the map. It's also still not known if the wisp scarab and the wildwood juice combine additively, adjacently, synergetically. Don't know exactly how that works either. There's some speculation they're totally separate mechanics, and trying to think of them as, like, for example, if you have 4,000 wisps from the scarab and then 10,000 wisps from the map, does that equal a 14,000 wisp map? I don't know. I'm actually leaning against that. I don't think it matters too much for the sake of this farm, but you know, that is something that got people talking a little bit about how that works. Anyway, I projected, especially back in Affliction League, there was somewhere around a 1 mirror to 3 to 4 locks to 20 to 30, maybe 40 sacred orbs. It's a ratio most people who are farming very seriously in Affliction League would agree with those ratios. Where it's at exactly, we don't know precisely. I projected that it was about 1 to 4 to 24. Okay, 1 mirror, 4 locks, 24 sacred orbs. So first of all, I wanted to see if that was true, if I got something even remotely accurate to that. And let's go ahead and get that data point out of the way here. I got 47 sacred orbs to 1 mirror. Okay? Now, locks is 5. So it does appear to me that I should have probably dropped at least 1 mirror based on these numbers here alone. Perhaps 2, probably not 3. Maybe I got lucky, maybe I got unlucky on locks. But the sacred orbs, you know, 47 is a halfway decent sample size, probably a fairly accurate number there. And I do want to specify or clarify that I don't believe 47 sacred orbs sourced from something other than Affliction-like mechanics is the same as 47 sacred orbs sourced from Affliction. Every single one of these sacred orbs presumably came from a blue wisp affected monster. Maybe 1 or 2 didn't. I suppose with that number, probably 1 or 2 didn't. But virtually all of them would have, and that would lean into the idea that the blue wisps are so effective at these higher tier currencies. Sacred Orb's not really worth all that much, but it is a very, very high tier currency in the sense that it's super rare. Almost as rare as a lock. Pretty close to it. Now over here we got Divine Orbs, Boxes, Reliquary Keys. I figured I might as well track those, and I'm glad I did because I did a little bit of interesting interchanging with the strats a little bit. No major deviations from the strat, but I did not use the exact same tree. I did use the exact same Scarab setup, okay, Bloodlines, Lineage, Double Wisp, and Glittering, but I did not necessarily use the exact same tree. About half of these trees featured Beyond and the other half didn't, and most of the trees featured % more currency as a kind of mandatory roll, as well as pack size roll. Every single map that I ran had at least some additional pack size, either through Maven chisels or rolled onto the map itself. And every single map had either % more Scarab or % more currency. We have a bit of an outlier here on line 14. Maps 601 to 700 had less currency, as you can see. Still dropped a lock. But on this one, I chose to focus more on Scarabs. Every single map had a % more Scarab roll, and most of them did not have % more currency. This was another major question about how this would work. Conventional wisdom would suggest that a % more currency roll combined with Blue Wisp would be utterly fantastic. Okay? That would be incredibly. Talking about, again, is it adjacent or synergetic? Another question about whether it's sort of on the side, more currency, or is it tying in to the Wisp and just dramatically improving the drop. It's pretty obvious to me at this point that it is not dramatically improving the drops because I still got quite a bit of currency, even though I had basically no focus on currency outside of Wisps for this set. No Beyond was here, which would help with some currency drops a little bit. And then, again, % more currency, almost completely out the window. Yet I still dropped about 2/3 of the amount of, relatively high tier currencies as normal, which is a very insightful thing. Leads me to believe that if one were to take this strategy very seriously, you would probably rather set up the map as if you were focused on farming Scarabs, but also let Wisps do the heavy lifting on their own for the currency. Would probably be a smart way of doing that. Which then, to take that to its logical conclusion, suggests that the glittering Scarab's probably not as good, since Scarab drops are unaffected by player quanta rarity, and that one would probably rather do the original strategy that I had done and almost did the 1,000 maps on, which would not have a glittering Scarab, but would have an influencing Scarab of Hordes, which to this day I still think is probably maybe the best strategy of the league. Depends on the investment cost of the strat, however. In the case of the glittering Scarab, the investment costs are raised dramatically. I do get extra tier 0s, which we can see 24 drop tier. No Mage Blood, however, so this most certainly did not pay off for itself. However, I did probably drop about 50% more currency on the whole for having that glittering Scarab that was usually worth about 2 divines. Anywhere between 3 and 5 divines per map is what I paid in total investment cost for the map. That would be 300 to 500 divines, somewhere in that range, for each 100 map set. By the way, 100 map sets are linked down below in a playlist as well as this spreadsheet, so you can take a look at that and check the discrepancies if you like, as well as how I rolled the maps for the most part. So again, just to recap, % more currency or % more Scarabs with a focus on pack size. Quantity did play a role, but I didn't use a specific formula on that. Kind of played it by ear, just looking at that. I also cared about the map rolls themselves. Some of them could be painfully difficult. I didn't necessarily want to roll something that was just outrageously hard either. Okay, so yeah, the Divine Orb count, looking at this once again, this looks pretty normal, other than the outlier that we already spoke of. Valdo's boxes, pretty good too. Now, Divine Orbs would be dropping in addition through the Delirium Orb rewards, and every single map had either 3 or 4 Currency Deli Orbs. I would say probably 10% of all Divine Orbs came from that source, maybe 10 to 15%. So that's where some of the gap is. But of course, boxes are a little more rare than Divines. And this number actually fluctuates depending on the current situation with the Valdo's boxes and what maps are submitted and everything. Same can be said about reliquary keys. And so maybe early on the reliquary keys were crazy. I got an outlier here on maps 101 to 200, but I think that was just a fluke for the most part. Definitely more rare than boxes. Reliquary keys were only slightly more common than Sacred Orbs. And for a while there, I figured I was supposed to drop 6 to 8 Sacred Orbs every time, but I focused pretty heavily on currency drops here towards the end, and yet the numbers got really low. Not sure why this happened. I'm just going to chalk it up to bad luck for why it happened. Still got locks over here with 5 locks in 100 maps. So that was a little less than what I hoped for. I was hoping for maybe 1 lock every 100 map set on average, but no, only got 5, so maybe 50% drop rate in 100 maps. And then mirrors, I figured I would probably get 2, or especially at least 2 after seeing 1 drop in the first 100 map set. But lo and behold, your boy went over 900 maps with 0, so that was quite a painful. But again, I suspect that I probably was supposed to get 2, or at least close to it. Tier 0s, I just kind of tracked on the side. I didn't really care that much about this. I just figured I'd track it because I can. But one thing I did care more about was Wildwoods, okay? So people were constantly speculating about the Wildwood spawn rate. People talk about going 50, 60 maps without one. I think at most I went like 70 or 80 maps without one at one time. But I did ultimately get a 7.6% spawn rate, which definitely fits within, I've been saying, I would assume it's an 8% spawn rate, but some people suggesting less. I definitely think it's between 7 and 8% chance to spawn. Or at least that's how it's set. So, yeah, that is the rate. And it didn't necessarily mean I got way better loot, because maybe, I didn't even get blue as a color in the Wildwood. But, I did every single map. I think I probably bricked about 1% of the content in total. Not too heavily on the Wildwood maps, but maybe just on generic maps. Slightly bricked. So I got most of the value out of everything. And so these are the final results. And that's basically... hopefully paints a picture for you. So again, as a final recap, major questions, purple, blue Wisps. Yes, I think that combo matters. I think it's especially strong with Rogue Exiles, but maybe the yellow is a little more important for Magic. All 3 colors are still good. Going all in on 1 color, blue, is typically not a good idea, even if it's a huge number. Because these things have a multiplicative effect on each other, and yeah, you definitely want to get some purple and blue together, because that will influence, I believe, the tiers of the currency. Another major question was percent more currency roll on the map combined with blue wisps. I don't have 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure, I'm about 90% sure that percent more currency is probably not the way to go in this farm. You should probably focus on scarabs, because scarabs are always going to be valuable. And they definitely proved to be good, regardless of the set that I did. It was always getting some value out of scarabs and or currency. And the final question, I guess, would be, let's see, maybe Beyond. Actually, I lost my train of thought a little bit. Beyond, I don't think I necessarily talked about this, but Beyond does seem to be pretty good with Wisp relative to everything else, which means Beyond is not very good for anything except tainted currencies. However, when you throw a bunch of Wisps onto Beyond mobs, they do start dropping some currencies, and I definitely saw some boxes, divines, and reliquary keys and stuff dropping from Beyond. That's a lot of extra monsters, but they added quite a bit of difficulty and time to the map and may not be worth putting on there. I don't think you should add Beyond on these maps unless it doesn't really impact the success and success rate of your clear. So that is where I'm at on all of this. I think I've basically included everything. I might have forgot something. I will pin it in the comments down below if I did. But guys, that's all I want to say on this farm. Will I be doing 1,000 maps again? I don't know. Maybe in the new game. We'll have to see. But this essentially concludes my adventure on 3.25. Probably not going to come back to doing anything on this league, even though it's going to last evidently until late February or something like that. I'm pretty much done here. You might see me log in a little bit here and there, just for streaming and stuff. But Path of Exile 2 is coming out in about a week, and I am very excited to give that game a try. Hopefully you are too. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know how you feel about wildwood farming, wisps. If the wisp, I think the other thing I might have forgot was whether the wisp scarab combined with the wildwood is an additive bonus, a multiplicative bonus, or what have you. It doesn't appear to me to be any sort of magical combining thing. Usually when you go from like 9k to 12k wildwoods, that's a big difference. Doesn't seem to necessarily be the case insofar as how it combines with the scarabs. Wildwood, 8k wildwood with 4k scarabs isn't like a 12k wildwood. It's not like that. So I think that's might be a bit of a misconception some people might have. Okay, now I think I included everything, and I'm going to let you guys go. I hope this video wasn't too long. I do want to hear your stories, or if you're farming something, if you're getting some crazy results, maybe if it's like way better than what you see here, great. Let us know in the comments below. Share what you're getting. We definitely want to see people having success with the wildwood. Raw drop, super high tier currency is one of the most enjoyable ways to farm. It's not the only way to farm, definitely one of the more enjoyable ways. And I had a lot of fun in 1,000 maps, but I'm glad it's done, and I'm glad to move on to the next game. With that, I'll see you next time in the next video, which will probably be something to do with Path of Exile 2.